What is the impact you want to make in the world? I don't care if you own a business. Heck, I don't even care if you have children. What is the impact you want to make in the world? Hey ladies, I'm excited for today's conversation. I interviewed Eleanor Beaton. She is a women's leadership mentor and founder of Fierce Feminine Leadership, an organization that helps ambitious women develop the confidence, presence, political savvy, and influence they need to smash the glass ceiling and take their seats at the tables where the big deals and big decisions are made. Eleanor has amazing awards behind her name. She was the winner of 2018 Nova Scotia Export Achievement Award, Business of Diversity Champion of the Year, and in 2017, she won the prestigious Profile in Diversity Women Worth Watching Award for her work promoting diversity and inclusion. She was also named one of Canada's Leadership Coach of the Year by the 2017 Corporate Excellence Awards. So you can definitely check her out at eleanorbeaton.com. Her last name is spelled Beaton. So Eleanor, Eleanor Beaton, eleanorbeaton.com. And we're going to dive in. We talk about everything, but I also think it's interesting that I saved this conversation for the U.S. election day. It doesn't matter where you are in the world or what is happening to you. I want you to know that you have worth, you have impact, and your desires and the message and whatever it is that is pulling at your heartstrings that wants to be expressed in the world, go do it, go be it. Let's dive in. So Eleanor, welcome. I'm excited. It's the first time I meet you.
I'm excited to be here. We were just talking about sort of creeping each other even more. And there's just so many people doing such valuable work.
Yeah. That's one positive about the internet. And what I love is one positive. There's many, but this is one. Because oftentimes when we start our journeys, and this is where the conversation is just going to blossom, but when we start our journeys, there's always something inside of us that's like, I want to, spew it out into the world. And then sometimes it's counteracted with, but am I alone? Am I crazy? Like, does anyone else think like me? So I know we're both passionate about leadership and using our voice. And I want to give the microphone to you to really get on that soapbox about what is lighting your soul on fire these days.
So what is lighting my soul on fire these days is the disruption that's happening, like at epic levels for our lifetime, the disruption that's happening and what's emerging from it, like the creative projects and campaigns and initiatives that especially women are participating in and creating that are really disrupting the status quo, that are uplifting each other in super practical ways. We were talking about voice, and one of my favorite people on the internet, which has given us more than one good thing. It's given us so many things, but it's this woman named Bosma St. John. So she was an immigrant to the US from Ghana. She was just named Chief Marketing Officer at Netflix. And before that, she was at Endeavor, and before that at Uber and at Apple Music. And she started, in the wake of the George Floyd murder and the anti-racist protests that were happening throughout the world, really, she started this campaign called Share the Mic Now. And she was using her influence with a group of super influential women who are sharing their platforms with Black women to kind of share their stories. And to me, that's such an emblem of women coming together and really using our influence to create change. That's what's inspiring me so much right now.
I don't know where I heard it. I've been listening to a lot of things lately. And, it was an interview of sorts. And it was first of all, I can hear a teenager when my oldest son is attempting to cook himself lunch upstairs. So, and then I just heard him scream like he burned himself.
I heard that. And the mom in me was like,
and I was like, I'm like, feed
that frustration
yourself,
or fear?
feed yourself. I'm like, you're fine. I don't hear a smoke alarm, so we're good. So this conversation, it was a white woman and a Black woman having this conversation. And the white woman said to the Black woman, why do you find that more white women are under scrutiny these days when it comes to sharing our voice and like speaking up? She said, we've given up on the white men. We need you. We need you.
Fascinating.
And I just got chills, and because it's like, wake up. We need you, right? We need you to come, like, to ally. We need you to stop pretend like, yeah, you feel guilty. Yeah. All this shit, but like, deal with your own shit. And like, we need you. Women need women.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to come together. And I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
We really do. And it's this idea of helping people in a super practical way, like sticking our neck out, making our platform available, supporting other women in a very, not just sort of this ethos of emotional support, which is super important, but also this, hey, let's get it done together. Women are tremendous organizers.
Yeah.
Like tremendous organizers have for generations worked behind the scenes because that was what was available to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Behind the scenes to drive influence. And we still have those skills. And now we have this ability with social media, which we're also really good at, by the way, to amplify and to help each other. So yeah, super, I don't know. Have you not found that this whole period, like since March, has been, so we haven't, lost anybody or anything like that. And so I know that there's tremendous disruption and hardship for people, but I have found that in the roots of the chaos that's happening, just this opening up of possibility too. If you're in the situation where you have avoided the worst of it, there is a lot of richness there for people.
Yeah. And I've watched people lose people, like online, like when it's, not personally. And it's been interesting because just seeing how everyone navigates this, but when it started, I had flashbacks to when I was diagnosed with cancer and like how every area of my life was in survival mode. And then doing all of the work that I did to go, okay, like I can inhale and exhale a little bit through this. Like we're going to be able to pay our bills because of all the work I had to do for that. But health wise, like just how we can undergo uncertainty and hardship. Like I've been saying, it's like a snow globe and it shakes you up. And those that are like, this is such an inconvenience. And oh my gosh, it's like, I hope it's humbled you a little bit and made you realize that not everyone has the ability to be as comfortable as you, most of the time. And that this is their reality all the time. And now it's just made it worse. So everything that it's almost like, it's like a detox. Everything that's coming to the surface, people are like, oh, I had no idea. And it's like, you had no idea because it wasn't your reality.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is that the whole world is experiencing that quote of there's a boat. I always screw these things up. Storm. We're all in the same storm. We're in the different boat.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. So
that's exactly where we're at.
Yeah. So what has this meant for you? Like coming to this point, but obviously this wasn't what made you want to amplify people's voices and like really, declaring to women, like step into your brilliance, like step into that. So what got Eleanor to this point in her personal and professional life?
Oh my goodness. So much. So we immigrated. So I'm an immigrant, right? I'm a biracial woman. We moved, my mother's from the Fiji Islands. My dad was Welsh. I was born in the United Kingdom, and my parents decided that they wanted to create a life in Canada, which is where I live on the East Coast.
Where are you in Canada?
I'm in Nova Scotia.
Okay. So I'm in Ontario.
There you go.
Yeah.
We the North. So we moved here, and what was so interesting is that as an immigrant growing up in a very small town, in the 1980s, I experienced a lot of racism. I wasn't from here, and I definitely felt that. And for me, my ability to move into a new place, to form, relationships and allies and friendships that were so necessary for my survival, especially dealing with the kinds of things that I was dealing with growing up, that ability to do a couple of things, to present myself, to be able to connect with people in a meaningful way so I could make friends with them, the kind of bonded friendships that you need to survive challenges and all that kind of thing. That was super important to me. And so I learned, that you have the ability to use language to connect with people and to form the kinds of relationships that are going to sustain you. And that's been this theme like throughout my entire career, whether I was, I started out working in advertising and then public relations and then journalism and then communications consulting and now women's leadership development, particularly, messaging and niching for women entrepreneurs. And this idea of having a voice, of using it to connect so that you can fulfill your mission. This has been like this thread that, when I think about my body of work and the different ways it's been expressed over time, it has always been about this. But I'll be honest, there's this other side of it, which was that I think when you're in that situation, when you're growing up, when you look different, you're experiencing things, I think that the other side of that, so one side is you're using communication to be able to, really strong communication to be able to connect with people. I think there's this other part of it where you really want to communicate perfectly, to be able to share a perfect image of yourself in order to kind of make up for the parts of you that are different. So that was a big part of, that was the shadow side of that skill set, which for me has been a big part of undoing. It's why I'm drawn to your work when you talk about being real and raw and authentic. Mm-hmm. That was actually not something that came naturally to me, to be that way.
That was like a survival tactic for me.
Real. This is so weird. So you had the opposite survival tactic that I used. So tell me about that. I'm curious about that. How is that?
Being like perfect was killing me. And I don't just mean from like the getting sick. Previous to that, I just couldn't. But when I go back as a child, I was such a rebel and I did everything possible not to fit in. That when people were like, you have to fit in, I would try that on, like, oh, this is making me sick. This is making me depressed. So I was like, am I alone? So yeah. I don't know how to be anything other than that. And so when people say to me, Heather, I'm attracted to this, I'm like, I don't know how to be anything other than that. And I can also smell it from a mile away. Mm-hmm. So when people put on a show, I'm like, oh gosh, I can see.
You're like, oh, hell no.
Oh, hell no. So let's talk about messaging and voice and mission and impact, because sometimes we don't actively seek out what that is until we have to, which is, oh, I'm a business owner now. Oh, I'm a personal brand. Oh, now I need to figure out what my message is. But why can't we do that? Why does it have to be in the context of business?
Right? I know, because this is so interesting. So when I think about the people who have been most influential in my life and most influential in terms of who I am as a leader, it's my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. So people who had a huge hand in showing me what's possible, in instilling the values that I live by to this day, who influenced how I move around in the world, they had nothing to do with business. It continuously comes back to my mom. And this is so interesting because my mom, so she was a teacher. She was the maid breadwinner when my parents got together. And then we moved to Canada. She doesn't know anyone. The culture is completely different. And she doesn't, as she said, she didn't trust anybody yet. And so she quit her job and stayed home with me, my brother, and my sister, and raised us. So she did not have professional success in that way. And I remember growing up really valuing professional success and wishing that I had a mom who worked. But it's so interesting because to this day, I consider her the most powerful leadership development teacher I ever had. She used to lift weights. She's 71. She could still bench like the 45-pound plates at 71. She played amazing. Squash and this kind of thing. So I remember going to the weight room and the squash courts at Acadia University with her because she would drag me along. And I'm so happy she did. She would drag me along so that she could work out and play sports and keep healthy and fit so she could have balance. So I remember going into those environments, she's the only one. She's got this massive afro. She walks around like a queen, just moving with confidence through these places and spaces. And I was like, oh, right. I can, you can be different. You can like, this is how you show up. Like, this is how you move as though you're comfortable in a place. This is how you exert your independence, by being yourself in any space. Now, took me a little longer to learn those lessons, but she was truly, the most powerful leadership development mentor in my life. And she had nothing to do with the business world.
And she was just modeling that. Like, it was the embodiment of that. And it's like we're planting those seeds. Like, she planted that seed for you. And maybe you have your rebellion years or what, you're trying to find yourself, but then you always come back to this anchor of your mother or the female role models in your life of who was she? What, how did she become that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me more about that and how I can't fathom, and I think we're getting there, of why women believe they don't matter, like why they believe their voice doesn't make an impact, that, how good they feel in their mind and their body and their soul and their spirit, whatever you want to say, doesn't matter and doesn't impact their children and how they become adults. And we're like the ecosystem.
Totally. It's one of the greatest ruses of humanity when you think about it, sort of modern humanity, how we've kind of systematically as a culture instructed women that we're secondary, that we're marginal, that our opinions don't matter, that we can't lead, that we're not great in business, that when we play sports, it's not as valuable. Like, that is a massive ruse when you think about our value and our role in the development of us as a species, right? Like, it's kind of unbelievable. And I'll give you an example. So I'm sitting in my studio and I'm looking at my bookshelf. And when I started as an entrepreneur, I needed to learn some skills. I had this vision and this dream, and it was truly me as a woman. I wanted to make my career something creative. I wanted it to have impact. I wanted to make something new and create something and invent something. So I was like, I think I'm going to try starting my own business. So I do that, and I have to figure out how to do it. And so I go and I start figuring out what books and what are you recommending. And then by the by, my bookshelves become filled with books that are written by men. And men are defining what success means in business. Men are telling you how to do it. Men are writing the books on it. They're teaching the courses on it. They're running the banks where you go and deposit your money. Like, they are very often owning the large companies that you use to do your accounting, and this is not a knock on white men. My father was a white man. I'm married to a white man. But what I am saying is it's really whose influence controls the conversation. And when one group of people control the conversation, you have such a limited narrative, and you begin to be moved off to the edge of the page. Mm-hmm. And if you're on the edge of the page, you naturally don't feel central. You don't feel important. You don't feel that you matter, and I think this is what we're all dealing with and what so many of us are trying to change.
Yeah. And yes, the narrative, the narrative, the bias, like, that's just your center. Have you ever gone on a vacation and then, like, maybe it's a different culture, maybe it's completely different atmosphere, and you're just experiencing that culture, the foods, everything. And you're like, oh my gosh, I was living in this little tiny bubble, right? Yeah. It's the same thing. What books are on your bookshelf? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Like, who are you talking to? The conferences or events that you're going to, who's in the room?
Yeah.
And just stopping, it's almost like, COVID, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, it's made everyone stop and just reassess. Like, completely. do a declutter of your life. Like, who do you want to learn from? And you don't actually need to know anything that's coming out of their mouth. But if you just sit and listen, those seeds will eventually plant, and your mind will grow.
Yeah, totally.
That's where exactly. I think we need to really dig in and take that conversation but what I see happen is when people, especially this ambitious go-getter female, Oh, I'm uncomfortable. If I can't check those boxes, I don't want to be in that room.
Yeah.
I don't want to read that book.
Well, and this is so interesting because I was thinking about this. And I was reflecting on this personally because of COVID, the pandemic and everything else. And so I'm reflecting just like everyone else. And I've, really kind of thinking through where in my life do I feel happiest and most connected? And where in my life do I feel the most disconnected? And it's so interesting because what COVID has done, I think, has sort of amplified areas in your life where it has amplified the parts that are working well, and it amplifies parts that are not working as well. In one area, so my boys are 9 and 13. I have been building a business. And for many years, the places where I made connections with other women is that I always played sports in these competitive sport leagues. So I would have my basketball ladies in the winter. I would have my soccer ladies in the summer. Well, we can't do that because you can't sweat on anybody. So all of a sudden I'm like, where are these relationships? Because when I was playing basketball and playing sport, what brings you together is your love of sport. But there's very different socioeconomic backgrounds, very different work. You come together around one thing, and there's a lot of diversity around that one thing. As you start to take that out, I started to feel this gap in my life where I didn't have these relationships with diverse women, and not just ethnically diverse, but they think differently. They do different types of work. They were raised differently, like all of that. And that's a huge part that, I realized, hey, it's time for me to kind of reassess and make sure I'm being more intentional about who is in my life, who I'm spending time with.
I love that. Diversity in so many different avenues. You learn a ridiculous amount from people. You're like, I know nothing about what you're up to. And that is so intriguing to me.
Right? Like, how often do you just have nothing to say? Not because you're bored, but because you're fascinated.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that to some of my friends that are in different industries. I'm like, tell me about that. Like, how did you start that? And then they do that to me and I'm like, oh, it's just easy. Like, you just, one foot in front of the other. And they're like, well, Heather, that's what I did too.
Yeah.
It's just, you can look at someone else and be like, oh, wow. And they're looking at you thinking the same thing. And you're
Exactly.
like, I just showed up every single day.
Every day.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about, I know this interview is going to go by so quick, but I want to get to, because I know the woman that's listening might think, wow, this is a great conversation. Mm-hmm. But we did start talking about voice and mission. Mm-hmm. And what do you say to that woman that knows there's something inside of her that wants to come out, mm-hmm. but she doesn't even know where to begin to uncover that process?
Yeah. So I think the first place to do it is that if you think about the women right now in the world who are most influential and really shaping our experience, who are able to capture attention and command influence, these are women like Brene Brown, like Malala Yousafzai, like Oprah Winfrey, like Jacinda Ardern, women like potentially a Rachel Hollis, who's been able to build a large sort of following, women like Bozoma St. John. What you'll notice about all of these women is that they are very clear about what their mission is. And it's easy to think, oh, they just are kind of born with it, or they just... But where that ultimately comes from, like if you feel this stirring of something more inside you, you have a sense that, what I'm doing is great, but there's something missing. There is this color, there is this texture, there is this, there is a part of me that is waiting to inspire myself, by the significance of the work that I want to do or the change that I want to make.
You just said something. What did you just say? There's a part of me that's waiting to inspire myself.
Right.
Explain that.
Well, I think that's what we're getting at here, which is that's what mission is. Otherwise, it's just kind of a job, Now, there may be, your job, what you do for money may not be your mission. I was talking to a woman this morning who has this company, but her mission is this total pro bono thing that she does. It's called the Feminist Coaching Collective. And so she works with women she mentors and pulls in mentors for women who are running for politics, for public office, right? She's not paid to do that. It's a total passion project that she has. So I think for so many women, it's not, meaning is a super important metric in terms of how we measure our success, right? And so if your life, you're not actively able to tap into what that meaning is, it can feel very hollow. It can feel very frustrating. It can feel like you're not living up to your potential, that your work doesn't matter, that what you're doing doesn't matter. So as you're trying to figure out what that is, what that mission is, I think the first thing is that to take the time to start articulating in a journal what does matter to you, what makes you upset, what frustrates you, what are you doing, who inspires you, why do they inspire you, who are your role models? Like all of the women that I just mentioned are massive role models. They inspire me to no end. Why? Because they're clear about the change that they want to make in the world. They're able to articulate it simply. And through that, they're able to get other people on side doing the work with them. Right.
And I don't think it showed up that way. Like it didn't start that way, which I think is where people get stuck, because there's like this perfectionism of like, I need to know what the elevator pitch is right now. And, what's the PDF on, okay, now I know what lights me up, where I want to get on my soapbox. And then we overcomplicate it.
Yeah. Exactly. Because it's a little bit like, I can remember in my 20s, I wanted to write a novel, and so I felt like I had to have it all mapped out first. And that was completely paralyzing to me. And so what I ultimately did, and a friend told me this, and this was such great advice. He's like, if you get this ball of yarn and it's totally knotted up, and kind of the only place to start is to find where there's an end. And you just start unraveling it from there, So it's like, so what you want to do as you're trying to uncover what your mission is and then articulate it is to find that end, find what is clear to you. Where do you have clarity? Where is there, what frustrates you? What issues do you care about? Who inspires you? And I suggest that you start by simply taking the time to gather your thoughts around it. You don't have to start a podcast tomorrow unless you want to, unless you're clear that that's what you need to do. But start the practice of articulating of getting clear on what you think and feel and articulating it somewhere, and then from there, you really have the ability to start using the power of your story to be able to, connect to that, to make those points yours and yours alone, points only you could ever make.
I love that. Yeah. Talk to yourself a lot. Some people,
right?
Some people are writers. Some people's are like, I've learned a lot about my message just by podcasting.
Yep.
And then just doing like voice notes on my phone, like thinking about something, just replaying it back to myself.
Yeah.
And if you have an outsider going, what do you hear me say? Like, what am I saying over and over and over again?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a creative process. And it is, have you ever read the book Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott?
No, but I need to, because everyone has told me to read that book.
Right. It's so great.
It's like a writing book, right?
It's a writing book.
Okay.
And it's really about kind of finding your voice, and in it, she coined the term shitty first drafts.
Oh yes.
So I am so in love with shitty first drafts. Like, more greatness has been produced from shitty first drafts. And to your point, it's not about, okay, here's my message. Here's exactly how you say it. No, it's like, you discover it by articulating it. There are 50,000 ways to make the same point. What's really important is, what point, are you trying to make? What's your position? How do you want to change the world? And that might be in a super small way today, but what is the thing that you need to articulate today? And this practice of, you have that sense of inspiration and you move to sharing it immediately.
Yeah. And a big question like that, how do you want to change the world, could be very intimidating. Mm-hmm. And you're starting small. And when you said first shitty draft, like the first time I heard that, the concept of allowing it to be messy is so vulnerable and counterintuitive to someone who's like, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. And I think that's where the juicy stuff happens. Like that, when you can just sit in your shit and be like, here's the first shitty draft, put it out into the world, send it to somebody, and then say like, dig through this.
Yeah.
And I noticed that whether it's writing or, consciously creating, whether it's your message, your mission, or consciously designing the life that you want, like reverse engineering that, you got to create the first shitty draft. Like, what do you want the next 30 days of your life to look like? You don't have to go from 0 to 60. Like, how do you want to feel when you wake up in the morning? What clothes do you want to wear? Like, do you want to eat what you're about to eat? Or do you want like a different grocery list? Like just consciously creating something.
And, and the interesting thing is that sounds so simple, but I can remember in my 20s, I was in therapy and my therapist asked me, and so what was not evident to me at the time, but now it's totally evident, is that I never really asked myself what I wanted. So I had my plans, I totally had my plans, and those plans were outlined according to a definition of success that I had. And so that was great. And I could just totally do that. But when it came to actually what I wanted, that question actually baffled me. And so I remember she gave me this assignment. She's like, here's what you're going to do, Eleanor. You're going to go to the grocery store and you are going to just go through. And as you shop, just pay attention. Do I want this? Do I not want this? And she's like, don't make a list. Go and see and pick the stuff up. Do I want this? Do I not want this? And like, I'm no dummy. And I'm walking through the grocery, and that exercise was so hard because I was disconnected from things. Do I want to be eating this or do I not? And to your point, I think we uncover our mission. We uncover the greatness that we are here to produce, whether it's something that other people deem as great or just us. One shitty draft at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of clarity at a time, right?
I feel like
messaging is about clarity.
Yes. I'm just having an aha moment. I'm like, so many people are going to be mind blown going to the grocery store. Like, okay, no list, which could be terrifying in itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And listen, it's like, it was really hard. Do I want this? I don't know. Why do I even eat this? Like, why do I eat this? I don't like it because it's good for me. Anyway, it was so funny.
To actually go, what do I want? Not what does everyone else want me to eat?
Yeah. Right.
But what is socially acceptable?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love this.
Yeah.
So I feel like I could talk to you forever and ever. And messaging, speaking your truth, knowing what that is a journey. It's not a destination. So where can people get more of you?
So the best place to go is if you're a podcast listener, you check out my show. It's called Power, Presence, Position, Your Message, Your Mission, Your Millions.
Love it.
Right?
Love it. I was listening to it and I love learning from women and business and really,
too, right?
Always getting a different perspective. I love it. And what do you got going on in 2020? So, I'm assuming all of these in-person events that you're hosting.
I know, all my mad in-person events. Wow, what a difference. I used to do literally like 8 in-person events a year. So those are all virtual now. Yeah. So we run programs. So I bring together groups of women entrepreneurs. So we are releasing a new program in the fall called Power, Presence, Position, which is really all about nailing your niche. This is for women entrepreneurs, nailing your niche, clarifying your message, and really creating a powerful marketing system, for your company. So that's like sort of level 1. And then we move people into a program called the Incubator, which is, it's a leadership development mastermind for women entrepreneurs. So that's what I got going on. Lots of creation, lots of creation and staying home, which I actually enjoy. I've been enjoying it. A little stir crazy, but
yeah, I think it's humbling. It just brings us back to our roots and kind of like,
it does.
We talked about like redefining. I want to ask you something about that. I was just having a conversation with a mentor of mine previous to this, and we were talking about different stages of business.
Yeah.
And how at the beginning, yes, you need to get the clarity on your message and who you're serving and all of that, which is very like strategic. And then once you have this momentum going and the confidence, it's all like peak performance leadership, like inner leadership. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, and I think that, that clarity and strategy is really, it continues to be important throughout your, throughout your tenure. It definitely changes though, because, I'll give you an example. I was talking to an entrepreneur once, and she was amazing at two of the most important skills you need to really get your business rocking, which is sales and marketing. And so she was incredible at sales and marketing. And so she was really able to get her business off the ground very quickly. And messaging and positioning is a lot of that, right? But she hadn't the growth of her business outstripped her growth as a leader. And so because of that, it was creating huge problems in her life, huge problems with team, huge problems because there were so many opportunities. She was not yet clear on who she was. And so it was difficult. She didn't have like a rubric to be able to decide, she didn't have a sense of where she was going as, an organization. So I do think that increasingly who you are as a leader becomes very, very important after your business has gotten its wings. Once you've got your wings, it's so much more about who you're being versus what you're doing. There is definitely hustle to get things off the ground. You got to make something happen, but then you can be much more intentional, I think.
Yeah.
A lot less work, more intention, more focus, more being to create the results that you want. I've absolutely experienced that.
Yeah. Especially from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah.
Like if you want to, and I don't want to say it's a movement because I think people are just becoming aware of it. Like, you can't avoid this.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about the humongous elephant in the room.
Right. And, and let's just talk about, like, practically speaking, let's just all talk about building teams too. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like trying to raise children.
Right? Like, let's just get help. Right? Exactly. We don't have to do it all. There's so many ways, there's so many ways to create these really cool entities where we don't have to compromise the best parts of who we are.
Yeah. I've just asked every time I take an action in my business, whether it's now or in the future, I say, who else can do this? Should I be doing this? Like I'm processing that. And 9 out of 10 times I have resistance when I'm forwarding that email to my team going, can you take care of this? Because really what I'm saying to myself is, you can do this yourself. Why don't you get it done? It would have been done already. Or, it would only take you an extra 10 minutes. I'm like, Heather, no, let it go. And then they get it done so much quicker and I can focus on where I'm supposed to. And ultimately I see the huge crossover between that and parenting and how you run your household. And it just makes magic happen. So Eleanor,
it really does.
A beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So they know where to find you on the podcast. Where are you hanging out on Instagram and your website?
Yeah. So eleanorbeaton.com and @Eleanor Beaton.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.